Chairman, thank you for your continued work and your leadership on this issue, and to you and Senator Cornyn, thanks for your initiative on the Fresh Start Through Bankruptcy Act. I'd very much like to be part of that bill, and I've been working on this issue for a while with other members of this committee. Pleased to join Senator Whitehouse in introducing the Medical Bankruptcy Fairness Act. We all know that the major reason that people go into bankruptcy, the precipitating factor is most often medical costs, healthcare emergency. And just last week, I introduced the Strengthening Loan Forgiveness for Public Servants Act, which would reform the eligibility for student debt relief for public health workers, teachers, and others who dedicate their lives to public service. Right now, someone has to work for 10 years before reaching the point where public service can be a reason for eliminating that debt. What I propose very simply is that it should be forgiven in intervals of 2, 4, 6, 8 years, so someone doesn't have to stay in the same job for 10 years in order to be eligible. There are all kinds of reforms that we can do, and some of them, as Senator Durbin mentioned, can be done administratively right now by the Department of Education. And I think we ought to put a little bit more persuasive pressure on the Department of Education to take a more enlightened approach here. But we all know that the undue hardship test, whatever it was meant to be, is really not working right now, like other parts of the bankruptcy code, quite frankly. And we've, I think, overlooked the opportunities to reform it in the past because sometimes it's viewed as technical and complex and difficult to reduce to a soundbite. But I'm particularly interested in this idea that somehow students take this debt with the idea they won't have to repay it. There's a moral hazard. Ms. Gonzalez, you just described the burdens that result from resorting to bankruptcy, and I'm assuming that students understand those consequences and wouldn't take debt with the idea they're just going to willy-nilly resort to bankruptcy to discharge it. They would go into that debt still with the idea they're going to repay it. Am I correct in that?
I think you are, Senator. I think nobody plans on being in a situation where they have to file for bankruptcy.
Because those burdens stay with people for a while, and they can be crippling in terms of getting a job, buying a house, all kinds of practical human consequences that anybody thinking about going into bankruptcy would have to consider.
That's correct.
Attorney General Raoul, is there more that you think we can do against the kinds of predatory lenders that all too often take advantage of veterans or others who may be lured into seeking degrees that aren't really going to give them the benefit of education that they think will provide careers, or the terms of the loan that may be predatory as well?
Senator, I think, yes. I mean, I think, as I illustrated in my example of Westwood, where the resources were shifted to profit instead of helping students, the notion of disgorgement of those ill-earned profits in an easier way of getting there, the notion that these institutions can rely on bankruptcy in the way that the students cannot in order to protect them from such is ironic at best, unjust, certainly.
Let me ask the question a different way. If lenders knew that the debtors could discharge the debt in bankruptcy, maybe they'd be a little more careful about the practices they use to lure those debtors into the debt in the first place, correct?
Certainly.
Thank you. Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Blumenthal.